Okay, I'm going to give you a little bit of help with your 3.2 homework. It's on page 8. I'm just going to do one question in the ready, and then I'll do an additional question for you as well to help you. Please use the homework help and hints. It's very useful. It's on the chapter guide. But in this situation here, it talks about solving linear systems by graphing. Now, why are we talking about linear systems? Well, although we're not actually studying that section yet, this is giving you an idea to get ready for the next unit, but also in preparing you for what we're trying to understand now with some of the graphs, just really interpreting the graphs and seeing what's happening. So if we first start, it's asking you to graph each set of linear equations on the same set of axes, which means you have f of x equals x right here, okay? And g of x equals negative x minus 2. Now, if you notice, they're both in slope-intercept form. Remember, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So if we look at f of x first, we can find the slope. Well, the slope would be here. And remember, in front of here, it's 1x. So this is 1x, which means the slope is the coefficient, which is 1. But then over here, we should have plus b. But because there's nothing there, that means that the y-intercept is 0. Then if you look at our next one, our next function, g, if we look here, it says negative x. Well, again, there's a 1 in front here. So our coefficient is negative 1, so our slope is negative 1. And then over here, we have a negative 2, so our y-intercept for the g function there is negative 2. Now you can take your y-intercept and apply the slope. So you could start here at 0 and then go up 1 and over 1, up 1 and over 1. And you can just start plotting points, up 1 over 1, plot points. And then with the other one, you'd start at negative 2. And because it's a negative slope, you'd go down 1 and over 1, down 1 over 1. Okay, so when you graph the two lines, it'll look something like this. And the point of intersection is where they intersect each other, where they cross each other, which is here. You notice that point right there. And what's the location? Negative 1, negative 1. The next question in the set section talks about describing the functions here. So when you're looking at this particular graph, you're trying to think about the vocabulary that we've talked about earlier. So you're looking for the interval or intervals where it's increasing, decreasing, or constant, the three main things that we were talking about before. If it does have a maximum, you can write the maximum. If it has a minimum, you put the minimum. And if there's any domain in range, you also want to do that. Now here's where we practice the interval notation. So when just looking at this graph, of course, we can notice that it's going down. So if it's going down, we can already start to think of the fact that it's decreasing. But then when you're talking about when it's decreasing, you have to think about where is it coming from and where is it going, or at what point does it stop decreasing, right? So for this particular one, it actually never stops decreasing. So we say it starts from negative infinity, and again, we don't include negative infinity, so we have the curved bracket there, and it actually keeps on going indefinitely. It almost looks like it would turn out to be constant. But this particular graph would continue to decrease slowly, because remember, we have an infinite amount of numbers, and it approaches a specific number. And later in your math career, you'll talk about something called an asymptote. And that's what this is approaching. Okay, so it's approaching a value, but it's not going to ever reach the value. So we say it's decreasing from negative infinity to infinity. Now, what else can you talk about? Well, again, there's no maximum and there's no minimum. But you notice, remember how I said it's approaching? So it's approaching 3, because if you look over here, this looks like it's at 3. So you could say the lowest y value you would have is 3. Well, it's never going to quite reach it, but we can say it's approaching 3. And then finally, our domain and range. Well, again, because we're not including 3 in our range, we can say it is the lowest value, but then the highest y value is infinity, because remember it came from up there somewhere. So because it came from somewhere up there, that's why we can say that it goes all the way up to infinity. And then the domain comes from negative infinity, so the x values, because it'll keep going off to the left, all the way to infinity to the right, because this will keep going to the right. Okay, so that's how you can describe a graph, and that's what you're trying to do in your homework here.